I think Dale Johnston killed those kids. There isn't any doubt in my mind. It was brought out in the court that he did it because that he was jealous of the two of them, and understand that he had been having an affair with her, and he was jealous. There's no doubt in my mind but what he was jealous of her.
I believe those kids were in the cornfield and they were killed there, that there was, at some later time, some few hours later, in the dark hours, that there was a cult, that they did return, and they performed a ceremony using the bodies, using the cutting of the limbs and that sort of thing.
Dale Johnston's innocent. I believe that totally. I also believe, and this is what scares me, is that those people are running around down there.
I think he got a fair trial. There was 3 judges, 3 experienced judges that heard all the evidence, pros and the cons, and all the arguments, all the testimony of the witnesses. I believe he got a fair trial.
Logan is the small county seat of Hocking County in southeastern Ohio. The city was founded by Governor Thomas Worthington on the banks of the Hocking River. It started out with 4 stores, 2 churches, and a population of around 600 people. Today, Logan's population numbers over 6,000. Logan was a quiet little town until the events that occurred in the first half of October 1982. The events concerned 2 teenagers, Todd Schultz and Annette Cooper Johnston. On October 4th, 1982, Annette was living at the Schultz's home. He left the house in the late afternoon and seemed to be upset. Mrs. Schultz said Todd followed her, and that was the last time she would see Todd and Annette. After extensive searching, 2 naked torsos were discovered in the Hocking River. 2 days later, the arms, legs, and heads were found buried in a cornfield in West Logan. The body parts were later identified as that of Todd Schultz and Annette Cooper Johnston.
They were just 2 good kids that they got along real well together. Todd thought an awful lot of her. They had planned to be married. I don't know whether that would have worked out eventually, but the Friday night before they were killed, they did talk to a preacher about it.
Todd was 19. He was never in trouble. I mean, he was ornery sometimes, but nothing, you know, bad. He didn't take dope. He didn't drink beer. Didn't go out and steal. He was home all the time underfoot. He took graphics communication down at Tri-County, Nelsonville. He loved photography. He loved the outdoors. Just a really nice boy. And Annette was, she had just graduated from high school, and in her senior year she had taken her first year of college in computer science, I believe it was. She was very smart. They had planned to be married in August of '83, and they were both going to get jobs and save some money and start a family in 4 to 5 years. They had their lives all planned, what they wanted, what they were going after.
In the fall of 1981, Todd and Annette met at Tri-County Vocational School. They had a good relationship. Todd would often visit Annette at her stepfather's farm in rural Hocking County, where the Johnston family had lived since 1977. Todd Schultz and Dale Johnston had no disagreements between them until the summer of 1982.
The relationship started off really great. In fact, Dale Johnston stated to me on a couple occasions that I interviewed him that at times, you know, he thought of Todd Schultz as a member of the family, and that during that course of the summer of '82, Todd Schultz was out to their property quite often because he was dating Annette. They would swim out there and they would have a good time out there. And then that relationship started to break down in somewhere in August of '82, in that apparently Dale came into the trailer one day while Annette and Todd were in there. They were going swimming on the family pond out there, and they were both changing clothes in Annette's bedroom, and Dale took exception to that, and there were some words between Todd and Dale Johnston about that he wouldn't permit that kind of thing in his household, under his roof.
Not long after this encounter, Annette moved from the Johnston trailer to the Schultz home in Logan.
He had been molesting her, and Todd had told me earlier that he had raped her. And at that time I had Todd contact someone that could talk to him about rape, a rape crisis center people, and they were going to make an appointment to get down and talk to them. And he just wouldn't leave her alone. And she wanted someplace safe, and she asked Sandy if she could move in here. And Sandy explained the situation to me, and I said, yes, I said, if you want her to move in there, so that's all right with me. You got to help the girl out.
Dale Johnston had moved to the Logan area in 1977 from Xenia, Ohio. Not long after, he had married his second wife, Sarah Cooper. He was a carpenter by trade, and he also worked on his small farm. He was considered an eccentric by some because he had said that he had had visions.
First time I met Dale Johnston, he seemed like just another guy that worked and was having a hard time making a living. Sarah worked in Dr. Mason's office, and he did contract work. The other couple times that I met him, personally he was, and I told him he was a certain, but I'm not going to put it on tape if you'd bleep it out anyway.
Dale Johnston is convinced in the correctness of the entire judicial system. And he believes that eventually that system will release him because he is innocent. He is convinced that his God will not permit him to go to the electric chair for something he didn't do.
He believed that it had to be his way or no way. He was always right. He never allowed the kids to go to church. Annette told me that they weren't allowed to go to church.
Todd and Annette disappeared. There was much speculation as to what had happened to them.
I was on duty that day in October of '82, and I took the initial missing persons report, filed it with the police department, and went through the normal procedures of trying to locate a missing person. At that time, there was no belief on our part that any foul play had taken place or anything. In fact, with Todd and Annette, there was even the possibility that they might have just ran off or had a lover's quarrel. That was the way it started out in the initial report, that they had been had a small fight argument that day at the Schultz residence, and they had last seen walking down the street trying to iron out their problems.
At the time the kids were missing, there wasn't a whole lot of concern in the community. Both of them were of age. They were 18 years of age. A lot of people just thought, well, they're just two kids 18 years old, ran off to get married or something. My older son and I, we discussed a lot of possibilities of what had happened. And one of the theories that we came up with was that Dale had done something with them, that Dale had killed them. And as it's turned out, that's what's happened.
After Todd and Annette had been missing for over a week, law enforcement officers organized a search of the Logan area.
So on Wednesday of that week, I contacted Richard Hicks, who's a newspaper reporter for the Logan Daily News, and had him put it in the paper that there would be an organized search on a Thursday night. I think that was on October the 14th, 1982. So we set up a CP, a command post down there, and I organized the search. We had approximately 70 to 80 people show up. That included law enforcement people, CB React people, Hocking County Crime Watch people, and interested citizens. Approximately an hour into the search, Chief Barron came over and got me, and we went to the bridge, the trestle behind Wolski Stair, and through that part of the investigation we found there was found 2 torsos in the Hocking River.
Before the torsos were found by police, Dale Johnston had had a vision in which he had seen water and trees. He felt that this had had something to do with his missing stepdaughter and her fiance.
He had never had any of these visions before that anybody knew about. I think everything he told the police were just things that he had on his mind that he wanted the police to know to help them find the bodies and so forth. The night that the torsos were found, Dale and Sarah were over there at the river, and they were asked what they were doing over there, and he told the police officer that they were there to identify the bodies. He's the only one that knew that they were going to find any bodies over there.
Dale Johnston and Sarah Johnston were also at the command post. They showed up about a half hour after the search had started. After the 2 torsos had been found, I talked to him for a few minutes up on the bridge or by the railroad tracks, and he asked if he could lend any assistance. And I stated, no, we got everything under control. We don't need any further assistance. And he also asked me if it was them. Of course, I couldn't say whether it was or was not at the time. So he also asked me if their heads and arms and legs were cut off. And I didn't comment to him because some of the other people, the civilians that were there, did view the torsos. And of course, when that happened, everything, the rumors started flying and everything started talking. So we cleared all the civilians out after we found the 2nd torso. When I was talking to him there on the trestle there at the railroad tracks, I thought his reaction and Sarah's reaction to find 2 torsos was kind of strange. Not the kind of reaction that you would normally expect from parents, that the possibility that these 2 torsos we found in the river could be theirs. Could be their stepdaughter and her boyfriend. And they just kind of hugged each other, so there was no verbal reaction.
2 days later, the rest of the body parts were found buried in shallow graves in a West Logan cornfield. With this, the quiet town atmosphere of Logan was shattered. Who could have committed these terrible mutilations? Who had killed Todd and Annette?
After that, I had people tell me that their kids wouldn't go to sleep in the dark. They wouldn't sleep in a room by themselves, even as far south as Nelsonville. And the community was frightened. At that time, the community was frightened because nobody knew exactly what happened or why it happened.
The town reaction was one that most people in this community thought that something like that could never happen down here. But there were talk of vigilante groups. Everybody wanted to arm themselves and start, prowling the roads and back roads of the county and that kind of thing. And the mood was, shoot first and ask questions later.
After the body parts had been identified, the law enforcement agencies began a full-scale investigation of the murders. The investigation lasted 11 long months. The Sheriff's Department searched the Johnston property and turned up several pieces of evidence. One of these items being a blanket, which they had thought that Johnston had used to wrap the bodies after he had shot the 2 teens. On September 29th, a grand jury handed down an indictment. A battery of deputies led by Hocking County Sheriff Jim Jones converged on the Johnston farm. They arrested Johnston as his wife, Sarah, stood by.
Significance of some of that evidence.
No comment.
Did he surrender peacefully?
Yes.
Did he say anything?
No.
Was he surprised?
No comment.
Who made the apprehension?
I did.
But on the other hand, perhaps he summed it all up.
What do you think the citizens of Logan are feeling right now?
Relieved. Same as we do.
And you do too?
Yes.
Even though the investigation had brought about an indictment, there were some who thought that the police work had been inept.
I could have a lot of comments on it about ignoring many leads which would tend to lead away from Dale Johnston, ignoring certain witnesses that we are now working on that may even have been eyewitness to these things happening that were ignored by the police and by the Sheriff's Department.
I think the major part of the investigation was handled very professionally, very carefully, and I really have no complaints about it.
Sheriff Jim Jones would only make this statement.
I prefer not to make any comment on it at this time. It's under appeals right now.
On January 11th, 1984, Dale Nolan Johnston went on trial for killing his stepdaughter, Margaret Annette Cooper, and her fiance, Todd Schultz. Johnston waived his right to a trial by jury and selected a 3-judge panel. Chris Veit, Hocking County prosecutor, opened the state's case against Johnston.
The state will present evidence in regards to motive and lifestyle, which will prove that the defendant, in fact, had a great dislike for Todd, was jealous over his relationship with Annette, and would do anything and did do what he thought he had to do in an attempt to break up this relationship.
Defense attorney, Columbus lawyer Thomas Tyak, contended that his client was innocent of the crimes of which he had been charged.
But in point of fact, we feel that the evidence will not establish that Dale Johnston committed these acts. In point of fact, we think the evidence is that the prosecution has simply ignored or set aside elements that are inconsistent, and when they are brought forward, it is obvious that in fact there is a reasonable doubt, as well as should be, because in fact Dale Johnston did not perpetrate these acts.
The first witness to take the stand was fireman Don Schultz. He told of the last time he had seen his son.
He had a Pontiac automobile. He was driving it. He backed out of the back of the firehouse and drove down the alley toward Mulberry Street, and he put his hand up and waved like that to me. And that was the last time I saw him.
Friday, January the 13th. The trial's spotlight shifts to Johnston's lifestyle. Former police captain Steve Mowry testified that Johnston told him that the family members enjoyed being nude while in the confines of their home. He also talked about the first search of the Johnston trailer.
In the search of the Johnston residence, the first search out there that I participated in, we found a number of rifles and shotguns, about 5 or 6, plus ammunition for those guns. The ballistic test, none of those guns that were taken from his residence matched the ballistics of the bullets that were found in the bodies. We found a set of knives in the kitchen of the trailer that Sarah told me that she had used in a butchering class that she had taken down at Tri-County Vocational School in adult education. Now, these were not the everyday common knives that you would find in most households. They were butchering type butcher knives.
On day 4 of the trial, police detective James Thompson, the man many credited with being the most important man in bringing Dale Johnston to trial, took the stand. Thompson told of the interrogation sessions he'd had with Johnston through the course of the investigation, during which Johnston had spoke of visions of water and trees when the 2 teenagers were discovered missing. Thompson also said that Johnston admitted to masturbating in Annette's presence. He quoted Johnston as saying he had acted in ways condemned in the Holy Bible. During day 5 of the trial, the testimony of Steve Rhine was admitted as evidence over objections by the defense.
The testimony of Steve Rhine, the hypnotized witness used by the prosecution, is perhaps significant. Prior to his hypnosis, he originally gave a statement to the police that he saw 2 individuals that could have been the 2 deceased people get into a blue van driven by some biker-looking people, the driver of which had long brown hair and a long mustache. After hypnosis, this big blue van became a small orange compact car with Dale Johnston driving it. And the statements to begin with, the ones that they started with, and the ones they ended up with have no semblance whatsoever of one from another. The tape of Mr. Rhine's interview when he was under hypnosis has been reviewed by experts for the defense, and they've indicated that it is absolutely loaded with suggestive possibilities.
One witness said that she saw Todd and Annette walking down Gallagher Street toward the railroad tracks on the afternoon they disappeared. Two other witnesses said they saw the couple on the railroad tracks in West Logan at around 4:30 or 5 o'clock on October 4th. Sarah Johnston, wife of the accused Dale Johnston, took the stand on the 6th day of the trial. She admitted that the family did practice nudity, but she said that there was no sexual contact between Dale and Annette during such occasions. She also said that on October 4th, she had been at home for dinner and saw Dale talking with two men that she did not recognize. This occurred somewhere between 5 and 6 o'clock. FBI expert William Bodziak said that he could make no conclusion on a plaster cast made from a boot print found by the Hocking River. The prosecution said it was the boot print that Dale Johnston made when he threw the torsos of Todd and Annette into the river. To top off the testimony, the court made Michelle Cooper Johnston a witness of the court because she was a minor. Michelle claims that she can remember nothing that had happened after 4 o'clock on October 4th, the day her sister and Todd Schultz had disappeared. On day 8, John Jones, an ex-boyfriend of Annette, stated that he had received harassing phone calls from someone he said sounded like Mr. Johnston. Jones said the caller threatened him with castration if it was ever discovered that he'd had sex with Annette. He also stated that Annette had told him that her stepfather was forcing her to have sex with him. Jones, under cross-examination by Thomas Tyack, said the caller identified himself as Dale Ray during the first call. Dale Ray was Annette's stepbrother. Through a videotaped deposition, Dr. Louise Robbins, a forensic anthropologist at the University of North Carolina, stated that she felt that Dale Johnston did make the footprint on the banks of the Hocking River. Todd's mother, Sandra Schultz, took the stand. She said that Annette had told her that her stepfather had indeed raped her.
I think Dale Johnston is guilty because, as it came out in the trial, he had had relations with Annette, sexual relations, and I think he was jealous of Todd and his relationship with Annette, and I think he just couldn't handle it, couldn't handle losing her. He was a very domineering person, a very possessive person. He acts like he's weak, like he's a weak person now, which is so unlike what he was before. It's too bad people didn't know him before this to see the difference.
I think a lot of that was put on. Of course, his attorney had told him to keep his mouth shut, not to talk to anybody or anything. But in seeing other people on trial for different things and viewing the television set and people that have been on trials, they don't have the same characterization that he did, that you don't stand around, they don't stand around and smile all the time. And people, you look at that and they wonder, how could a man even be on trial and stand there and smile like he did? I think a lot of the time when he looked at me and smiled, he was saying, yeah, I killed your kid and you can't do nothing about it. I really think he feels that way. I think that went through his mind on several occasions when he looked at me in the courthouse.
The defendant, Dale Johnston, then took the stand on the 11th day of the trial.
Did you see Todd and Annette at all on October the 4th, 2018?
No, sir, I did not.
Did you kill them?
No, I did not.
Did you cut them up?
No, I did not.
Put them in that cornfield?
No, I did not.
Any time ever had there been any sexual contact between you and Annette?
In a way, yes, there was.
How long ago had that been?
That was in either late 75 or early 76.
Not getting into specifics, has there been any repetition of what happened back then at any time since 75 to 76?
No, sir, it had not.
Then Johnston told that he had talked to the coroner before the bodies were identified.
Explaining that the teeth had braces on it. It looked like some of the braces on the front teeth had been removed. We told him that they had not been put on yet. From their discussions, any hope was gone. It was a net.
After the bodies had been identified, Johnston told of how the police had tried to badger him into confessing to the killings.
First thing I remember Detective Thompson saying to me after that point in time was, "I know you killed the kids. Confess. Ease your conscience. The city is scared to death. Put their fear to ease. Confess to killing the kids."
The defense and prosecution summarized, and after 2 hours of deliberation, the judges returned a verdict.
We, the panel, find the defendant guilty of aggravated murder. Ohio Revised Code 290301 is set forth below. Did unlawfully and purposely and with prior calculation and design cause the death of Todd L. Schultz in violation of Ohio Revised Code.
As Johnston stood, showing no emotion, the judge read that he was also responsible for the murder of his stepdaughter.
We, the panel, find the defendant guilty of aggravated murder. Ohio Revised Code 290301 is set forth below. Did unlawfully and purposely and with prior calculation and design cause the death of Margaret Annette Cooper, also known as Margaret Annette Johnston.
Fred Mong, special prosecutor, had this to say.
Well, what can be said except tragedy and personal loss for everyone? I mean, it's just no other way to feel about it.
I think they reached the right verdict, in my opinion, yes.
I'm very satisfied. The men have worked real hard on this, and I believe the whole town's going to be satisfied.
During the course of the trial, a man sat outside the courtroom. He was the one uncalled witness for the defense. His name was Jeff Hilson, a Columbus, Ohio school teacher who still believes that Dale Johnston is innocent.
And I was retained by attorneys Sir and Tyak through the astute observation of Attorney Sir. He had reviewed the evidence and had noted that there were strange markings and symbols within the mutilated torso of the young people that were killed in the cornfield. I was pretty sure that what we had was a satanic cult killing.
The Satanist theory really upsets me. I don't think there's words that really express how much it upsets me. I think it's absurd. I think he's grasping, and I see nothing that points to Satanists. Nothing at all.
I think that there's definite proof that that a good, strong proof of occult goings on in relationship to these body parts.
We have what we're dealing with now, which is the satanic cult killing. These people are dedicated Satanists. They've been doing it for some time. I'm not talking about killing humans so much as I'm talking about there's a hierarchy within the satanic ceremony, which goes in the killing, which goes something like this. They start with small animals, possums, squirrels, dogs.
This is an area that that has had many unusual things occur in the past. There have been animal mutilations growing from small animals to very large animals over the past 10, 12, 14 years. There have been numerous reports of cult activities and cults in this whole area of the state.
Authorities said then and say now that there had been animal mutilations, but as far as they could determine, these mutilations had nothing to do with devil worship. In the Logan situation, the scenario ran something like this.
there's a symbolic cut always made by usually a sword or a large knife. In this case, in the case of the Schultz cut across the chest, the initial cut is always across the body, opening up the heart area. It's very significant. The heart in Schultz's case was defiled again. It was stabbed. I imagine if they could have gotten to him when the heart was still beating, they usually extract the heart and pass it around. And as grisly as it might seem, ingestion takes place. They eat the heart.
My feeling of Mr. Hilson. Oh, that's a good one. I saw Mr. Hilson in the courthouse the morning that he was down for the trial, and I am aware that he did not testify. I don't know exactly why he didn't testify, if he's supposed to be so smart that he knows everything, that the defense attorney didn't use him. But my guess would be that he'd have just been laughed out of the county.
They would then probably make the cut on the gut area. This is significant because if, you know, it's pretty well known that Catholics make the sign of the cross on the top of the forehead where the soul is supposed to sit, or across the heart area, right? Keeping with the notion of satanic defilement, the cut would be in the gut area. The rays coming out of the, on the left side of the dark side of the cross really signify the Trinity, or the satanic Trinity, if you will. Lucifer, of course, the fallen angel, the head of the world in their way of thinking. Beelzebub, which is kind of like his second in command. And then the third portion of the Trinity is either like Amun-Ra or Baal or any number of the smaller, lesser deities.
He was there prepared to testify. However, it was decided by the defense team as a whole that the case was in such a posture that no rational judicial panel would come to the conclusion of guilt. And to put this additional evidence in might only tend to panic the community rather than serving any other purpose.
In this instance, they were going to come back on October 31st, which is All Hallows Eve, and ingest the body parts themselves. And I'm not talking about eating great masses of them or anything.
I don't care who it is or whatever you want to kill. If you're going to eat anything at all for a ritual, cannibals or anything else, you don't kill it. And if you even put it in the refrigerator and left it there from the 4th till the 30th or the 31st, it'd be spoiled rotten. You can't even buy a hamburger and put it in a refrigerator and have it 2 weeks later without, you'd be sick as a dog. It'd be spoiled green. Let alone put it out in the ground someplace for the maggots and everything to eat, to crawl all over it. No, Mr. Hilson is just, I'd hate to have him teaching my kids anything.
The heads probably came off before the bodies, or the arms and legs, simply because what they usually do is they'll take the heads off and have those people symbolically, the sacrificial victims, symbolically looking at their own disarticulation, if you will.
I don't know of anybody in Logan that believes that that's what took place. I don't. There's just not that many. I suppose there might be somebody that believes in an occult or an occult thing, but from what I understand of this case and from what the evidence that the 3 judges looked at, I don't think anybody would believe it.
We have testimony from 2 people that work at a, I think it's a ceramic plant that is right down the railroad tracks from the mutilation site. On the night of October 4th, a man was going to work on the 3rd shift, and he normally, for 5 or 6 years, has walked down the railroad tracks, across the culvert in the river, and right into the plant. That night, he has testified that he heard large amounts of abusive language, yelling, screaming. He said, and I quote, that this ain't your usual party down there. That's what he said. He was so scared that he went back to his house, got in his car, and drove all the way around to his place of employment. Another man who lives in the trailer court, who still lives in the trailer court, but was working 2nd shift and got off approximately, I think the shift changes like 1:18 or 1:20 at night. was walking down the culvert on the railroad track, past the culvert, got almost to his house, heard the same thing going on, was so scared that he went back to the ceramic plant, got a friend of his who was a night watchman to take him all the way around and home again. Now these are grown men.
When asked to identify these two men, Mr. Hilson refused.
No.
Why not?
I can, but I won't. I mean, because that's going to be part of our appeal process.
It was sort of ludicrous to believe that someone would take these kids out to his farm where there was an active strip mine operation going on, approximately 50 to 75 feet deep, and kill these kids and take them back into Logan. If someone had the idea of doing away with these kids, their bodies could be put down the strip pit and buried under a little bit of overfill, and by morning they'd put 75 feet of stuff over top.
I feel that he put the bodies in the field with the expectation that they would be found. He knew that we were looking for them someplace, and by putting them over there in the field, he felt that we would probably find them, or find the parts of the bodies that were in the field. And at that time, then they could say yes, that they'd been murdered or something, and then they could collect the net's insurance, which I understand they did do.
They were calling up their deity. They would actually, they actually believed that Lucifer manifested himself at that ceremony. And what they would do is they would barter with their god. They would say, for example, Lucifer, here we have 2 victims. They'll barter with the body parts, and they'll say, well, listen, I'll give you this much if, I'll give you this if you, in turn, give us long-term agreements.
I would really like to be able to sit down with him and debate this with him. Because, I don't know, I don't think there's any sense in upsetting people around the community with this bunk when there just is no reason for it.
Mr. Hilson spoke of 2 blood spots he said were in the cornfield where the bodies were found. He believes that this proves that Todd and Annette were killed in the field by Satanists and not by Johnston in his trailer, as the prosecution claimed.
These 2 blobs make a complete, almost a complete circle, you know, with a burial, all right? 16 to 18 inches wide, approximately half to 3/4 of an inch thick. I mean, we're talking about a lot of blood.
There was no blood around those body parts or anywhere in that vicinity, although there was some what appeared to be blood-stained ground about 25 yards north of the burial sites where the body parts were found.
I'm sure in this satanic rite that took place in the cornfield, there were maybe 4 or 5 acolytes, you know, younger people. There were at least 2, if not 3 or 4 adepts, you know, people that actually took place in the mutilation. And it was a training process.
During the investigation, a search was made of the Johnston trailer in which there were found several specialized butcher knives. Sarah Johnston said that she had purchased them for a butchering course. When asked if he felt that Sarah or Michelle knew anything about the killings when they happened, Don Schultz replied,
"Yeah, I think so. It was brought right out in court that, as near as we're able to determine, that they were with him, or at least Michelle was with him, and I think they were both with him when they picked the kids up."
I think they got one of the right people. To get the rest, you know, it's going to take some pretty heavy investigation, but there are more than one.
He had something to do with it. And I hope I'm not wrong, because he was found guilty, and I would hate to see a man innocent found guilty if he wasn't.
Steve Mowry had this to say about the possible involvement of another person.
I can't answer it, okay? It's a good question, okay? And I can't answer that because there's a possibility that the case is not closed, that there could be other arrests, and so you have a very valid question, but I can't answer it.
Presently, there is the question of whether there were others involved and whether the case is closed. Jeff Hilson says that Dale Johnston is innocent and that Todd and Annette were killed as a part of a satanic ritual. But there are many questions about Mr. Hilson's theory. Johnston's lawyers are working on an appeal, as well as requesting a new trial based on the Satanist theory. Dale Johnston's execution date was set for October the 4th, but a stay has been granted. There are many unanswered questions involved in this case. The verdict against Johnston appears to be based on his lifestyle. Much of the evidence was circumstantial. There was no murder weapon found. There was little, if no proof found to say that the killings were committed in the Johnston trailer. The question still remains, is there a reasonable doubt?